If you're a web developer, then you need to take a look at Azure Static Web Apps, enabling you to easily and seamlessly deploy your static web apps to Azure. And it's packed full of amazing features. I'm going to break down everything that you need to know today. So tune in. Hey everyone, I'm James, and today I want to talk to you about why you should be using Azure Static Web Apps. Now, I'm a web developer on the side, but I have many websites that are static. And I've been using Azure Static Web Apps myself to host all of my static web apps completely for free, which is awesome. Now, if you don't know what a static website is, let's start there. If you're a web developer, then you probably know the typical sort of web app, which enables you to deploy to a server. It does a bunch of processing. It serves up different assets back and forth. A static web app is something that doesn't require that server-side rendering. Everything is done in the browser, and all the content is served because it's all static. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, images, things like that. And additionally, API endpoints are hosted using serverless architecture. So if you sort of fit these different requirements, then Azure Static Web Apps might be for you. So, okay, what does it mean? HTML, CSS, JavaScript? You can have a vanilla JS application, but what if you're using different frameworks and libraries? Well, there's tons of them out there that are totally compatible with Azure Static Web Apps. And here's just a sampling of some. Things like Gatsby, React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, Next, and Nuxt, and even Blazor WebAssembly applications are all compatible because these enable you to have that static website where just that HTML, CSS, or even WebAssembly in the case of Blazor can be served up statically. So if you're using any of these or other ones, which I'll put a link to the documentation below, definitely consider taking a look at Azure Static Web Apps. Okay, well, let's talk about the key features. Well, there's tons packed into Azure Static Web Apps that I love, and these are just a few. Well, one, there's web hosting, right? And actually a very gracious free tier that I'll talk about here in a bit. So you can host your static web apps for free, and also a standard tier that offers a few more options as well. But you have a full integrated API, which I'll talk about with Azure Functions. It's globally distributed, free SSL certs and custom domain also built in. You can integrate auth providers, you have staging environments, and there's so much more. You can think of it as sort of just if you're hosting a website, you'd want the same exact features, and Azure Static Web Apps has many of them built in. Now, I'm not going to cover all of them, but I will put links into the documentation below so you can go ahead and browse through all the features that it has. Now, I talked about integrated APIs, and Azure Functions, the serverless compute part of Azure, is built in directly into Azure Static Web Apps. That means you have your static web app and an Azure Function backend, so you can go ahead and automatically serve up and integrate into different systems. So if you're talking to databases or you're doing other things, your static web app can easily talk to that Azure Static Web App, and it's integrated in, and it handles all of the CORS registrations and everything automatically. They sit sort of side by side here. And this is great because Azure Functions are deployed and run only when needed. Now, there's plenty of ways to get started. There's great tutorials on the documentation website, whether you're using any of those different libraries or frameworks that I talked about. But additionally, I would say head over to github.com/staticwebdev. This is a great resource because it has a bunch of public templates that you can use to automatically start scaffolding out your web app. Here, for example, I recently used the Blazor starter one, which not only has a starter template, but also has playwright tests built right in to do UI automation testing too. And there's tons of them in here, and they're all open source, so you can take a look at them. You can go ahead and create a repo based off of them, or just see what's in the template so you can add that into your application. Now, once you're ready to deploy, it's super simple. There's great command line integrations that you can set up through Azure CLI or the Static Web App CLI, or use the VS Code extension as well. Of course, you can configure things through the Azure portal. Now, one of my favorite features of Azure Static Web Apps is the seamless continuous integration and continuous deployment that's built right in. You can easily tie it to GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps, or integrate it into your own systems as well. This means every time you change your code, it'll automatically get rebuilt and then redeployed automatically to Azure Static Web Apps. I personally use GitHub Actions, and you can configure all of it automatically through the Azure portal as well as one of the options, and it'll go ahead and create your YAML configuration files automatically, which is really, really cool. Now, like I said, there is a free plan and a standard plan, and many of the options, if not almost all of them, are available in the free plan. Now, this is a screenshot of just the breakdown as of today of this recording when it came out. So make sure you take a look at the documentation as new features are added all the time to Azure Static Web Apps. But some of the key differentials here is that while they all have web hosting, obviously, and CI/CD integration and SSL and custom domains, some of the things like the number of staging environments and app size are a little bit different. And if you are looking to use something like Azure Front Door, or you want to bring your own Azure functions, you can also look at the standard plan and, of course, the pricing for that too. All right. Well, go get started on your journey with Azure Static Web Apps. Go to azurestaticwebapps.dev, which is a great resource. The team is putting together all sorts of different 30 days of Azure Static Web Apps, all out there for you. And of course, I will put links to the documentation below. Hope that you found this overview of Azure Static Web Apps useful. And of course, don't forget to join the Azure Static Web Apps team right here on the Azure Developers YouTube as they live stream their community stand-up. So you can ask them your questions every single month. So make sure you like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more Azure developer content. Thanks for watching.